Whether you're in North or South Carolina or anywhere else in the world, enter the Cat Cave with Ryan, Frick, and Shannon Smith to listen to your favorite Carolina Panthers podcast as part of the Keep Pounding Podcast Network, where you can find shows like Embrace Debate and Inside the Vault, powered by the Fans First Sports Network, and on the Tobacco Road Sports Radio's YouTube channel, where you can also watch Believe in Panthers with Desmond Johnson and Jonathan Stewart. It has been a couple of weeks since we have been with you guys. Ryan Frick here alongside my co-host Shannon Smith. Shannon, what's going on, bud?
Man, a lot has transpired. Of course, the Panthers would win when we don't have a show. Of course they would. So, yeah, man, just ready to talk about it.
Yeah, you mentioned we haven't had a show. The week prior to last, I was on a cruise, and being the consummate professional that I am, decided to run into the Gulf of Mexico with my phone in my pocket. So I have been dealing with a lot of nightmares from that. I do have a new phone, but unfortunately lost a lot of files with that old phone. Hopefully trying to get that stuff back up and running so I can. But then obviously with dealing with that last week, we did not have another show. And like you said, of course, 2 weeks without a show, the Carolina Panthers go on a 2-game winning streak. They knock off the New Orleans Saints, get the New Orleans Saints head coach fired, and then go to Germany to play the New York Giants, win in overtime. Shannon, let's just talk about it. We don't need to go through all the stat lines. If you're watching the show on the YouTube channel, you'll see the stats over the last 2 weeks, offensive stats, and some very, very slim stat lines here. Bryce Young has got the job going forward. The last 2 games, almost 300 passing yards, 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. He's only been sacked twice. What have you seen out of Bryce Young the last couple of weeks, considering the fact that, like, after the week 1 beatdown by the New Orleans Saints, the Saints have not won another game, including that game in which they got fired. I think they actually won. They didn't win another game until they fired their head coach after this Panthers game. And then obviously the Giants are the Giants. They just benched Daniel Jones this week for Tommy Cutlets. What have you seen out of Bryce Young in the last 2 weeks that gives you some confidence in the remaining schedule?
I've seen some confidence. I've seen him step in the pocket. I've seen him be able to deliver the ball. I've seen him be able to read. I've seen him be able to continue plays as well too. So I've seen some confidence. And another thing that I've seen that might not be said is that I have seen a little bit of communication. He's talked. He's talking to these guys. These guys are talking back to him. So that's something that we've not seen with the Panthers is them communicating, them talking, them having some type of kinship, them executing like a team. This has been a trial by fire year. This has been a tough year because, you have one quarterback in and then another quarterback comes in. You think that you found it with this guy. You didn't. Then you go back to the next guy, say, hey, look, man, here you go. Try this again. And you're kind of like a little bit worried when he's in there. But he's able to make the communication. He's able to talk to these guys. The huddle looks a little tighter. I like it.
Yeah, listen, Bryce Young is playing with confidence that he's not played with in the NFL as of yet. Granted, he hasn't thrown for a lot of yards, but he's also not turning the ball over. I think that's the big key when it comes to the running back. Listen, we talked about countless times on the show. If there was one player that the Carolina Panthers needed to lock up, it was Chuba Hubbard, and they did. A 4-year contract. I don't have the details in front of me, but they locked him up. And specifically against the New York Giants, Chuba Hubbard had over 150 yards in that game with a couple of touchdowns, 3 touchdowns in his last 2 games. Chuba Hubbard is the guy. Apparently, and I can't say his name off the top of my head. The rookie running back out of Texas is slated to make his debut. Say that again?
Jonathan Brooks.
Jonathan Brooks is slated to make his debut with the injury to Miles Sanders this week. You'll get to see his first action in the NFL. But you're starting to see the youth sort of show up for this team. Jatavian Sanders had a big game against the New Orleans Saints, the leading receiver in that game, but he also had a touchdown against the Giants. Xavier Legette, the week prior, the leading receiver against the Saints with a touchdown, but did not come with a score against the Giants. So all these rookies between Jonathan Brooks making his debut this coming week, Jatavian Sanders and Xavier Legette, stepping up as threats on this offense as rookies. Chuba Hubbard finally getting the extension that he's so well deserved. He's locked in for a few years, and there's a high likelihood that we're going to see Adam Thielen return to the lineup this week. So some exciting things happening, despite the fact that they have a pretty tough opponent this weekend. We'll get to it later in the show. But defensively, Shannon, I'm not sure how confident I am in this defense. In 2 games against quarterbacks like Derek Carr, who's not known to be all that mobile, and Daniel Jones, who's known to have legs, but has not played well this year. They've only been able to get 3 sacks. Now, they did turn Daniel Jones over twice after not turning over Derek Carr in that second Saints game. They're out allowing just over 200 passing yards a game in those 2 wins, just under 200 rushing yards per game in those 2 games. Now, granted, they had Taysom Hill to deal with in that first week, and Alvin Kamara, who had his way against the Panthers defense. Shannon, is there optimism about the defense going forward? I know we've been banged up a lot this year, but I think DJ Wonnum returned to the lineup and got a sack in his first game action. What are you seeing out of the defense that gives you hope that the Panthers might be able to? I mean, mathematically, they're not out of the NFC South race. Is there anything you're seeing from the defense that gives you some sort of optimism about the rest of the season?
I am seeing them cover better on the passing attack. I'm seeing them cover better. Mike Jackson out there breaking up passes. They were able to get Daniel Jones to turn the ball over twice, which was good. I like the fact that they're finishing tackles as well too. They've got to finish tackles. It's something that they have to do. They have to be physical. That's one of the things that they have to do is be physical. You may not get there. You may not get to the quarterback as much, which is a problem to me because you have to get to the quarterback. You have to do that because that's going to help your defense a lot. Getting to the quarterback, of course, getting to the ball carriers, all your other ball carriers, but getting to the quarterback is definitely something that has to be done. But they are deflecting passes. They are covering better. I think one of those interceptions that was picked off in the Giants game in Germany was Josie Jewell got one, I believe. And so the linebackers are covering better as well too. This squad is trying to put something together on defense, but the pass coverage is something that I'm happy about.
You mentioned that the team is trying to put something together. I think the team is trying to put something together on both sides of the ball, which begs the question, Shannon, are the Carolina Panthers making a mistake by winning games? There are some really bad teams in the NFL this year. The Dallas Cowboys just put Dak Prescott on injured reserve. He is out for the rest of the year. The Las Vegas Raiders, every time they lose, Shedeur Sanders posts on X, thank God, meaning that it sounds like he wouldn't mind going to Vegas to be in that market. The Giants are really bad. The Saints have become really bad. There are some bad teams in the NFL. And with a roster like the Dallas Cowboys continuously getting worse and worse, blown out by the Texans last week, can't seem to get it right. Now they're relying on Cooper Rush. Are the Panthers making a mistake by winning games, or should they finish the season trying to vie for the NFC South and as a detriment, raising their first draft pick higher lowering it farther down in round 1?
I'm just gonna be honest with you, Ryan. I don't think it's ever a mistake to win games, especially with this being the Panthers and what the Panthers have went through in the past few years. I get the fact you want to get a good draft pick. I get the fact you're doing it, but the Carolina Panthers have 11 draft picks at their disposal as we speak. Now, what they do with those draft picks says one thing. So that's something that has to be considered. But when you talked about these teams being bad, Jacksonville getting tore up by the Lions. You mentioned the Cowboys, which the Cowboys put a lot of money into only 2 players and let another player go, Derrick Henry, that they should have got. And these other teams, the Giants being bad, the Saints being bad, there are a lot of squads that are just absolutely just not doing well. The Jets not doing well. I don't think it's Carolina's fault that I mean these past 2 games they played 2 not so great teams. Now there's going to be a time where they're going to be playing some teams that are going to be tough. So I don't think it's a mistake that they're losing games. These 2 teams, let's be honest, Ryan. Let's just be real transparent to everybody. These 2 squads that Carolina beat. Number one, Carolina wasn't supposed to beat those squads. Number one, and number two, they won against those squads, and it's not really big because they were not that good of. They were not good teams. The Saints weren't doing well. The Giants weren't doing well. So of course, but anytime you win, it's to your disposal. You have to do it. So those were 2 games that they should have won and they had to win. And they did it. So good for the Panthers. Maybe not so good with their draft stock, but who cares? Win games.
Yeah, I listen, to say that I'm upset about them losing would be sort of I don't know, an asinine thing to say. I mean, if you look at their remaining schedule, they get the Chiefs this weekend. Then they play the Buccaneers December 1st and December 29th. So they get the 4 and 6 Bucks twice in the next 6 games. A Buccaneers team that is 1 game ahead of the Panthers in the NFC South race. You can take that for what it's worth. And then they get the Philadelphia Eagles, who is right now number 1 in the NFC East, just ahead of the Washington Commanders. Then they get the aforementioned Cowboys on December 15th at home. That now looks like a winnable game. Shout out to our former co-host, Michael Davis, because that would be a fun game to watch them lose, them being the Cowboys. And then they get the Cardinals are mixed in there, and then the Atlanta Falcons, who are in first place in the NFC South at, that's right, 6-5. Shannon, I mean, if you look at the schedule, based on the fact that Carolina has figured out how to beat bad teams, and we're going to predict the Chiefs game later, so we'll bypass that. I feel like that they've got a chance to beat the Bucks and maybe potentially sweep the Bucks, unless Mike Evans is back, and then that becomes an issue. The Cowboys game seems much more winnable now. Cardinals sit in first place in the NFC West, so they're no pushover. I mean, and then we get the Falcons to end the season. Is there a scenario if the rest of the teams in the NFC South just happen to fizzle out? Is there a scenario in which the Carolina Panthers can come from behind, come from the dead, and win the NFC South?
That would be an amazing daggum story right there. It would be great, but as much as I hate to say it, be careful. Just be careful getting your hopes up. As a Panther fan, be careful. Once again, 2 teams that were not that great. I know. I get it. But the fact that Carolina's winning games is something to be happy about. That Cowboys game, I'm praying to God that Carolina wins that game. I'm praying to God that they do. And the Tampa Bay game, the sweeping the Bucks would be great. Getting a little redemption against Atlanta would be great because you don't know what you're going to get out of Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is a coin flip. There's times where Kirk Cousins can put up 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a 50 burger, and then the next week go out there and throw maybe 100 yards, 3 interceptions.
I mean, they pulled him last week for Michael Penix Jr. in the 4th quarter.
Right. So, and here we are, and they're paying him a lot of money. They're paying him a lot of money, which is insane to me. And then also, and then Baker. Now, on the other hand, Baker's played his tail off this year. I got to give credit where credit's due. Baker's played his tail off this year, but injuries have happened, and you've got that going on. They were getting hurt in the beginning of the year. They're starting to get a little healthier towards the end of the year, which is what you want in the regular season. But if the Panthers show that they can play as a team, yes. It doesn't matter about the talent, because look at the Cowboys. The Cowboys are loaded with talent, and look at them.
Are they though? Are they loaded with talent?
Yeah, I mean, maybe minus the quarterback position. Maybe minus quarterback position.
I mean, they've got I'm not going to get in that comment. I get. I mean, listen.
I understand.
I think if the Bucks are without Mike Evans in 2 weeks, not this coming weekend, but the following weekend, I think the Panthers have a legitimate shot to knock
They do.
off Tampa Bay.
They do.
I think Mike Evans will be back by the end of the season.
Mhm.
So maybe they split those games like they did with the Saints. Nobody would have expected after getting blown out in week 1 by the Saints that they'd be able to come back and beat them
No.
later in the year. And that's exactly what they did. So it's interesting to see how the season is going to play out. We're gonna pick the game that we have this weekend in a minute, but Shannon, I wanted to bring up the situation with Cam Newton and the organization. I'm not sure if you were able to get a hold of the audio clip that's sort of gone viral on Cam Newton's podcast. He came out and said that he was disappointed that he's not being showcased by the Carolina Panthers, erased by the Carolina Panthers. He goes in for a 7-on-7 tournament into the Panthers facilities, and his son mentions, "Hey, Daddy, where's your pictures?" Cam Newton in that same interview, in that same podcast, made a comment that he is never going to retire. He knows that he is no longer ever going to play another snap of competitive football again, but for whatever convictions that he wants to stand on, he is never going to retire. And there was a radio show host that made a good point today that I want to bring up after I hear what you have to say about it. What are your thoughts on what Cam Newton had to say regarding the fact that he's sort of, in his mind, not being honored by the Carolina Panthers?
You know, I would be remiss to say that Cam Newton is not an integral part of the Panthers franchise. Any fan out there who says that is not a fan. And I think that it is messed up that there's nothing showing for Cam at all. Because Cam had a wonderful rookie year. Cam played some very good football, got the Panthers to a Super Bowl, got an MVP. There are guys that other franchises, look at some of these other franchises here. There are players that are still looked at, and Cam is outplayed. There are some teams, like, you look at being a fan, there are some players that we know that other casual fans may not know. But there are fans of football that know who Cam Newton is.
Cam Newton was a household name.
Yes, they know who that dude is. They know who he is. There are guys that are not household names as Panther guys that we know. And that we'll always know, but some of these guys don't know. But Cam is one of those guys that everybody knew. Cam was was at one point in time, arguably could have been one of the faces of the NFL from the time that he got drafted. Could have looked at to be the face of the NFL at one point in time, even though he might not have been, maybe might be, might not be. But at one point in time, he was considered and he was in the conversation. So yeah, I don't know why in the world he's not even shown or anything at all, whether you love Cam or you hate Cam. You got to put him in there because that man played. That man balled out.
Well, I might blow your mind here because I understand why the Carolina Panthers haven't done it.
Okay.
I've been on record to say that I wasn't ever the biggest fan of Cam Newton. There were times when he made the game more about himself than his teammates. But at the end of the day, Cam Newton had more talent than anybody on the field, and unquestionably is one of the greatest Panthers of all time. I don't think, especially as a Panthers fan, as a Panthers supporter, you can argue that a former league MVP took the team to a Super Bowl. Only Jake Delhomme was the only other quarterback to be able to do that for the Carolina Panthers. But there's a little thing in the NFL called tampering. And shout out to Rob Brown because I'm going to go on his rant for him. He went on the Rob Brown show earlier today and made this argument, and I'm going to second it. I don't know if you call this plagiarism or not, but the fact of the matter is that Cam Newton has not filed retirement paperwork with the NFL, and according to this podcast, said that he never will. So unfortunately for the Carolina Panthers, unfortunately for Cam Newton, he is still considered an active free agent with the NFL and inside the NFL Players Association, which means that whether the New England Patriots post pictures of Cam Newton in their facilities, whether the Carolina Panthers do it, whatever the case may be, because Cam Newton is still an active NFL player, that can be viewed is tampering in order to sign Cam Newton. So let's say hypothetically, and again, I'm essentially regurgitating all this from Rob Brown today. So apologies in advance. But let's say, for instance, that Cam Newton on this podcast said, I'm never going to play another getting down to football. The Carolina Panthers start posting Cam Newton pictures on the Bank of America Stadium inside the facility. And Cam Newton all of a sudden says, well, you know what? I think I got one more season in me. I want to come back to play football. Well, now the Carolina Panthers have sort of recruited Cam Newton to come back to play for Carolina. And if the NFL felt the need to do so, could fine the Carolina Panthers as well as take away draft picks. If you remember correctly, the Miami Dolphins were penalized draft picks for tampering with one Tom Brady.
That's right. Okay. That's right.
So in one aspect of, you totally understand where Cam Newton's coming from.
Right.
That I'm one of the best Panthers in history. I don't think there's any fences that needed mending. I don't have a problem with ownership or the general manager or anything like that. I just want to know why they're not honoring me. Well, listen here, and I don't mean to say this to be derogatory, but it's gonna come out derogatory. Listen up, moron. File your retirement paperwork. That's all you got to do. If you're already acknowledging that you're never going to play another snap again, call Roger Goodell on the phone. Send me the paperwork. Sign the dotted line. Fax the paperwork back into the office, into the home office. Guess what? You're number one in the Carolina Panthers Ring of Honor. Now you're going to be Hall of Fame eligible. You're going to be able to have your picture plastered on Bank of America Stadium inside the facility. They're probably going to be able to sell your what do you call the classic jerseys, the throwback jerseys. They're going to be able to sell Cam Newton throwback jerseys, and you're going to be able to make money off of it. So, with all due respect, I think, and I don't know if maybe he didn't take that into consideration when he went on this rant. But I felt like it was nothing but an attention grab, a sympathy attention grab, to try to make like the big bad Panthers don't want anything to do with Cam Newton. And it's as simple as the fact that you're still an active player and they can't do it.
That makes a lot of sense, though. I mean, I don't think he even took that under consideration. I don't think so, because I didn't either. And I just remember that as soon as you brought that up, because the Miami Dolphins did get penalized for that. And that makes a lot of sense. Why not?
The Atlanta Falcons got penalized for tampering with Kirk Cousins.
Yes.
To get him out of Minnesota.
Yes.
So it happens. So at the end of the day, the reason why I wasn't a fan of Cam Newton, because he tried to make things about himself, this is just another example of that.
Yep.
You file your paperwork, officially retire from the NFL, and I'm sure the worst owner in sports will make sure that he is properly honoring you inside Carolina Panthers facilities.
If he can make some of it, he will.
So anyway, that's the rant that I wanted to go on. Again, big shout out to Rob Brown, because I saw this video. I didn't know how to feel about it. I sort of felt the same way. And Rob Brown, a former guest of my other podcast, Half House and Touchdowns, made a compelling argument that I have now regurgitated onto here, this show, The Cat Cave. Just fill out your paperwork, man. You know what? I'll go ahead and apologize for calling you a moron a second ago, because I think that was a little excessive. But what was not excessive is my opinion that you like to make things about yourself and maybe kind of put yourself above everybody else. That's what you're doing in this situation.
Yes.
Take a step back. You've already been humbled from the time that your injuries caught up with you and you were no longer the same player.
Mm-hmm.
Humble yourself just a little bit more. Play ball. Take your Hall of Fame ring that will eventually come to you. Get yourself put in the Panthers Ring of Honor. Get your jersey retired, because that's coming too. All you got to do is sign a piece of paper saying that you're done with football. You know who we should give a phone call to? Brett Favre. Brett Favre filled that paperwork 3 times, so he knows how easy it is. Make the call, dude. All right. Shannon, we got a game this weekend. The 9-1 Kansas City Chiefs are 11-point road favorite at the 3-7 Carolina Panthers. Unfortunately for the Panthers, the Kansas City Chiefs are coming off their first loss of the season to the Buffalo Bills. And unfortunately for Carolina, I think they're going to try to take it out on the Carolina Panthers. The 1970 whatever Miami Dolphins team was able to crack their champagne this past week, as there are no more unbeatens in the NFL. The Panthers coming off a bye week, Shannon. Do they have any chance of covering an 11-point spread against the Chiefs?
I really don't think so, and here's why. The Kansas City Chiefs, see, this is one thing that people gotta understand about unbeaten streaks, win streaks. Once the win streak is snapped, all the pressure leaves. The Kansas City Chiefs do not have any more pressure of being the undefeated team in the NFL. They can go back to playing football. They can go back to being one of those squads, one of the regular squads. They're not the popular kid anymore. So that's it. And that's what is going to make Kansas City very, very dangerous, because they don't have to worry about a win streak anymore. They can go back to their regular scheme and go win. It's going to be very, very tough. With Carolina coming off of two big wins, big wins to Carolina, but not really big wins to anybody else. They played two teams that were on the ropes, and now both of these teams are feeling it right now. I really don't think so. I don't think Carolina's going to get completely, totally killed, but there's a possibility that they could.
Listen, the Chiefs have not been the Chiefs of old this season, but the Carolina Panthers are giving up the most fantasy points to the opposing tight ends, and they've got arguably one of the best tight ends in NFL history coming into town.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you this right now. I think the stadium is going to fill up.
Of course.
I think they're going to have a decent crowd having the defending Super Bowl champions in your house.
Yes.
What's probably more scary for the Panthers is that there's an outside shot that Isaiah Pacheco returns this week.
Yeah.
And the Panthers don't do a really good job of stopping the run. So whether it's Kareem Hunt or Isaiah Pacheco, I think the Panthers are in for a long day. And I do think the Chiefs cover this 11-point spread. Listen, it was a fun 2 weeks, but at the end of the day, we wanted to see growth out of the Carolina Panthers. We're seeing that growth that we did not see last season with this Carolina Panthers. You're seeing smiles. Obviously, with wins come smiles. You're sort of, again, starting to see what Dave Canales wants. And as long as Bryce Young isn't taking sacks, he only took 2 in the last 2 games. He's not turning the ball over. He's thrown 1 pick in the last 2 games. And you've got a running back like Chuba Hubbard to rely on for a quarter of 1,000 yards in 2 games. Then I think you got a shot to at least keep the ball out of Patrick Mahomes' hands. But unfortunately for the Panthers, the Kansas City Chiefs are better known for their defense this year than their offense. Shannon, let's go ahead and get out of here. Give everybody a couple minutes back to their day. If you want to find Shannon on social media, you can find him on X and Instagram at podcast_Smitty. You can find me, your guy, Billy Ryan Frick, on X at Tapouts and TDs, on Facebook.com/Tapouts and Touchdowns, and on Instagram at Ryan Frick Comedy. But make sure you go and follow the Cat Cave social media, Facebook.com/The Cat Cave FFSN, and on Instagram and X at The Cat Cave _FFSN. So until then, you may now exit the Cat Cave, but make sure you listen to more content on the Tobacco Road Sports Radio's YouTube channel and more Carolina Panthers themed podcasts on the Keep Pounding Podcast Network, powered by the Fans First Sports Network. For Shannon Smith, I'm Ryan Frick, and we'll see you next week right here inside the Cat Cave.
Go Panthers.